Stassi Schroeder and Kristen Doty fired from Vanderpump Rules after past racist actions against Faith Stowers resurfaced.
It hit the ceiling for me and made me really want to run for the hills when Kristen and Stassi decided they were going to call the cops on me. This is when I quit. Like, I left the show, was invited back, but, to tell my truth, but decided it wasn't going to do anything for me. So I ended up not coming back.
Faith recently shared that experience on Instagram Live, recalling how Stassi and Kristen falsely attempted to identify her as a woman police were looking for in a string of robberies. That Instagram Live led to a call for action from the network, ultimately leading to the dismissal of OG stars Stassi and Kristen from the show, as well as newer castmates Max Boyens and Brett Caprioni, whose own racist tweets resurfaced at the start of season 8.
It was like they wanted to attack, like, I was wrong and I was this and I was that, calling me names, saying my hair was nappy, which is...
These gays, they're trying to murder me.
What do I think of her?
Yes.
I don't think of her.
Read about that in the New York fucking Post.
I am really struggling with how to start this episode in particular because I feel positively incandescent with rage.
Yeah, this isn't going to be very fun.
I am truly incandescent with rage after the episode of Vanderpump Rules that we all just experienced.
Are you talking about last night's episode?
Last night's episode.
I haven't seen it yet.
I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet.
That
but
bad?
It's going to be Thursday by the time you see it, so you should have by now. But you can also listen next week here on Eating for Free, the podcast recording live from the absolute edge of the internet. My name is Mrs. Incandescent with Rage, Joan Summers.
And this is Brittany Cartwright, accent victim Matthew Lawson. Rotten hell.
I just need to say this, okay? Here's the thing. I have been watching this show for 10 years. I have, in many ways, been a direct fucking witness to the deep, deep, deep misogyny of these cast members. The truly, unfathomable depths they will go in their absolute, unending hatred of women. Truly.
Glacial Antarctic water depths, you could say.
The the joke about the such and such iceberg, the Vanderpump Rules iceberg. You know what's underneath the water on the Vanderpump Rules iceberg? Misogyny and racism all the way down. And this
you hit the bottom of the
particular,
ocean floor and under the depths in hell. Is the
it's
misogyny that this cast produces.
Below the Earth's crust. That's how deep this goes. Okay, this is the molten core of the Earth itself. This is literally penetrating the fourth dimension levels of misogyny. Okay? And what I want to say is that it never fucking changes with these people and the people that love them and watch them on TV and give them the ratings that they get. Okay? These are people where we were led to believe for 10 seasons that Katie Maloney was some sort of arch villain of West Hollywood that was punishing poor old Tom Schwartz who can't take care of himself. That she was this big old bully.
Schwartz.
Yeah. She was this big old bully, and look how funny it is that Tom Sandoval kicked a door in to a Tom Schwartz pathetically sitting on the toilet, fake crying, screaming, "Look at him. He's a fucking abused victim." Okay? We all watched, okay? We all watched as Jax tried to make Brittany the problem. We all watched as Tom countlessly tried to make Ariana the villain. We all saw Tom Schwartz pour a drink on Katie Maloney's head. And do you know what the response was from people? What a fucking bitch Katie Maloney is that she had a reaction to that. Okay? That was what people said about that. That is how people responded to that. And this season, we have lived through a entire calendar year of people logging on to the World Wide Web and spinning every sort of story they can spin about how Tom Sandoval is a misogynistic, gaslighting, male manipulator, narcissistic, sociopath, danger to women. And the second, like literally the second he gets on camera and bats a few eyelashes and whimpers and cowers in the corner while Ariana raises her voice for the second time since all of this happened in March, suddenly, oh my God, maybe Tom Sandoval was abused by Ariana. God, Ariana's such a bitch. God, I can't believe Ariana would get so mad. You know, it's actually really ugly that Ariana would raise her voice. She's coming off really ungrateful. Doesn't she have more to be happy about in her life? Why is she spending all of her time yelling at Tom Sandoval? You know, what a fucking bitch she seems like. Maybe Tom Sandoval was right. It doesn't even seem like she liked him anyways. And you have, by the way, Mr. Brock in the corner leading the charge on this, when he is a man with charges on the other side of the world and children that literally will not speak to him over what transpired in his previous marriage. And he has the audacity to question why Ariana Madix gets angry on camera. And everyone's like, oh my God, Brock's such a hero. Brock speaking truth to power. Say it, Brock. Oh my God, I love Brock. He's never been sexier to me. Are you people sick? Are you people sick? I'm asking, what happened in your home life growing up that you are at this point currently where we are in society, post Me Too, post pandemic, post uprisings, post everything that we could possibly live through in our adult fucking lives. And the hill you want to die on is Brock has never been sexier, criticizing Ariana for being mad at Sandoval. That is the hill that you want to die on. Brock with the domestic violence charges. Brock, whose anger has actually caused lasting legal repercussions for him, his children, and his ex-wife. That's the hill that we're going to die on. That is the conversation of the day. That is the thing that we've all settled on. Are you sick? God. Are you people sick? I swear, we write these series, we dedicate 12 episodes of our podcast to dissecting misogyny on this show. And people are logging onto the internet in real time, proving exactly what it is that we set out to do when we recorded this in the first place. Sick. This is sick. Bravo fans are irredeemable, okay? There is a section of hell reserved for all of you, and you will burn there for the rest of eternity for the things that you have logged on to the internet to tweet about women. Know that. Know that. Know that. Know that. And I'm going to be in the other VIP section of hell laughing at you because while you burn miserable and alone, at least I'm in the part of hell where I could do ketamine and still stay sober. So fuck you.
Wow.
Fuck you.
You really came in like, I have a message for America.
Fuck all of you.
A message for the world.
I'm sick.
It's a devastating set of affairs. It's a devastating place to be.
Never in my life have I yelled at a woman like this.
That's what I was about to say. I was like, damn. You
Papa,
were like,
don't preach. I've been losing sleep.
You're like, Mama, I'm about to spill something so devastating.
Oh, we're not spilling. Okay, I'm fire hosing. I'm fracking. Okay, I need a new adjective for the water.
We need to frack the Bravo discourse.
Yeah.
Obliterate this.
I mean,
there's something so deeply cooking in some of these Bravo fans' brains that I think is on the level of QAnon Delulu. It's getting a little frightening.
My heart rate is like 5150.
And then they bring you down to a place of having to literally defend this like we are talking about World War III coming.
I'm serious. Like,
like we have to be on the front lines against the ideological wars
that
are coming out of this community.
What is the number one thing we say on this podcast? besides eating for free at the podcast, recording live from the absolute edge of the internet, what's the number one thing we say besides the F word? What's the number one thing I like to say?
Mama, let's research.
Mama, let's research. That's good. No,
that's a good one.
I'm always right, and everyone should listen to me more.
Oh, that's true.
And the way that we have proved ourselves correct yet again in this series. Yeah. I also have to say, in that same breath, we are liars. We've lied. We've lied.
Well, you have.
How did I lie? Tell me how I lied this week.
You lied because you told the world and me privately, but also the world publicly, that we will make sure the next episode is the finale, even if it's 5 hours long. And yet what you have decided to do is to split our notes into multiple extra parts.
2 parts to be specific.
Just 2?
Just 2.
Okay.
This episode and next week is the absolute last week. And it coincides perfectly with a trip across the country that I am taking. And then I will rest. I will pull myself out of misogyny manor where I have locked myself inside. And I will sleep for the first time in 3 months. But know that I do this all because I love you.
Wow.
I do this all because I want this podcast to be better than any other podcast on the internet, and I really think we've put our whole pussies into it this week.
I've seen us be sourced on quite literally Bravo fan iceberg charts. Like, we are breaking into that world with the truth, I would say.
Yeah,
and power.
I mean, we are cited multiple times on Wikipedia. I get Google alerts by accident for like people putting us in research papers.
That's what I'm saying, though. Like, guys, we need to fight the front lines. The war is coming.
I was going to try and make a Girls Aloud song reference, but I can't do it today.
You don't have the
Life
strength.
got cold. Life got cold. My spine and my body got cold reading the notes for this week's episode. I've been really listening to a lot of Girls Aloud. I just have to say that, by the way. Like,
Mama, let's be honest.
Wait, have you ever listened to Girls Aloud?
No. You're like, I'm time to kill me again.
Bitch, if I could choke the life out of you right now, I would. I'd strangle the shit out of you right now.
Fly all the way to the Bay Area to take me down, stake me in the chest.
Wow.
I probably have. It's been a minute.
So you've never left your soul on the metro? You've never left your heart on the metro? You're never crying on the metro, leaving your heart at the disco? Nothing?
I guess not.
Wow.
I have nothing to say. I know when I'm in this position.
I'm going to read scripture.
I know I'm in this position. I'm just here to listen. Much like some of the people that we're going to be talking about today.
I'm going to read scripture to you. Okay?
Okay.
And I think maybe we can use this to start the episode.
Okay.
100 O's and X's lighting up the dark. Now they turned into a question mark. I was in my favorite party spot.
Oh my God.
Sipping on my favorite soda pop. I saw this guy come rocking up, so shy and out of place. His moves were so ridiculous, but he looked so meticulous. I could tell that he meant business, getting all up in my face, but I left my heart at the disco. Now I'm crying on the metro. I wrote your name on the window. Oh, baby, I don't know why. Why did you go? Now I'm crying on the metro. Wrote your name on the window. I know that you got to feel the same, baby, but I don't have a number. I only got your name.
This is so you. I can see why.
Didn't have to say one syllable. His body language said it all. We moved in closer to the wall for a little one-on-one. We danced till it was minimal. Put me in a sweet delirium. I hopped into the powder room. When I came back, he was gone. I'm not going to keep going, but I could. I could know that.
I bet you could.
Know that. When we're done with this podcast, I need you to go on youtube.com. Write this down.
YouTube.com? Yeah, I'll write that down.
Write this down.
Mm-hmm.
Write this down. I need you to go on youtube.com. I need you to search biology, but Girls Aloud.
I'm so sure I know
I want
this.
you to film. I want you to film your reaction. I want a live reaction.
Let's do it on
to
the
biology
Patreon.
by Girls Aloud.
Let's just watch that.
Yep.
For an hour and a half.
Well, we can't do it. We can't do it on the Patreon because
we keep getting flagged.
And
NBC Universal is coming for us, you guys. I swear, their executives are at my door.
I left my heart on the metro, and Stassi Schroeder left her brains somewhere in West Hollywood. So we're talking about Stassi Schroeder today. That was a bad transition, but I'm the host of this podcast. I can do whatever the fuck I want. So guys, I really thought about it, okay? And we have sort of been circling over the last couple episodes a narrative, I would say, that we have built up through talking about Tom Sandoval's past, talking about Ariana Madix, Sheena's past, and really like the pasts that these people come into Vanderpump Rules with get blended around, and in hopes that, you know, all of that trauma and life and misery will create some sort of eternal life-giving nectar that they can use to ascend to godhood and free themselves of the shackles of Vanderpump Rules. And it has not worked. It has only worked for one of them, and her name is Ariana Madix. And we've really been sort of grappling with themes of misogyny and racism and exploitation in Bravo, and how Bravo has really like shaped culture and in many ways shaped public perceptions about women, how women communicate, how people communicate to women, and what women's stories, I guess if I was to put it plainly, look like, are read like, and are reacted to like on television.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing that, I was going to conclude with sort of a contrasting set of motifs of Stassi Schroeder's cancellation and Lala Kent's escape from Randall Emmett after the pretty little world that she had spun for us collapsed on her in 2021 and in 2022. And in doing so, I really just realized that there was no way I could really do either of these stories justice if I tried to tell them in the same episode. And I also mean that for people like Faith, who was victimized by Stassi and Kristen, and what Stassi and Kristen did to Faith, but also how that affected the way that Bravo created content, hired people, fired people, etc. Like, that is just not a story that can be told like amongst a bunch of other narratives. And in separating the two, I really think I am quite proud of how this series will turn out next week. You just have to bear with us, but let us get into the fall of Stassi Schroeder in this particular episode. The end of an era. And I would say the textbook for ultimately what it means and the prize you get for competing on Vanderpump Rules. As they say in many parts of the internet, play stupid games and win stupid prizes.
Yeah.
So, in the end of the last time we checked in with Stassi, she's sort of at the apex of her career. She has a booming podcast. She's getting brand deals left and right. She's gearing up for tours. She has agents. She is sort of poised to break into not necessarily just the mainstream, I would say. I don't think it was quite at that level just yet. But more than any of these other cast members, she had written a successful book. She was prepping for another successful book. And the book that she was, just recently released was called Next Level Basic. We talked about that a little bit in our last episode about Stassi a few episodes ago. And it really was about like embracing this sort of like peak white girl boss feminist shtick that she really marketed to the show and to her fans, and embracing the like whiteness that she was emblematic of, both on the show and off the show. And we see her sort of like start to ascend a little bit. And right as she is gaining escape velocity from orbit around Vanderpump Rules, she is shot down by space lasers in really the most like spectacular ways I've ever seen happen to anyone on this in the internet. Like,
in hindsight, it really was that though. Like, she was legitimately at the threshold, like leaving the gravity well, and it was like she was shot by her own authority.
And you know what the thing is? Like, she built the space lasers. Yeah, she put them there.
She worked with NASA to build this technology, and then they were like, "Actually, Diva,
and you know
you're
what?
coming right back down to fucking Earth, and you're never leaving again."
Number one, you're test subject number one for these lasers that you helped us build. And it's funny too because, like, with that, what happens to Stassi is like literally from that we can see every other attempt to leave this show mirror something almost inexplicably the same, even if the circumstances are, of course, different, because no two stories are totally the same. So we're going to start with one piece in Glamour. Stassi was gearing up to have a marriage. She was going to marry Beau, who was sort of like a TV guy who had come in to her life, and they like quickly fell in. He became a cast member on Vanderpump Rules, and she was planning her wedding, and she was writing these like repeat wedding articles, one of which Stassi Schroeder, quote, "My friends will complain about my destination wedding, and that's okay." That was from January 8th, 2020. And she really is like marketing the shit out of her wedding.
Oh,
She's
I mean, it's the event
like,
of the year for her, especially since Beau is like the perfect companion husband to like this exact kind of very white archetype she's perpetuating.
Yeah, like she is like,
he's like the cool guy who listens to his, important wife.
And she had a column, I guess you could say, in Glamour, of which we had that one, quote, "Stassi Schroeder, I never wanted to have bridesmaids. Now I have 9. Stassi Schroeder, help, my guest list is stressing me out." Or Stassi Schroeder, "A prenup can be a romantic experience. Let me explain." So she does 4 columns for Glamour as sort of the quote unquote basic bride. And if she was writing a second book, I can imagine that the wedding part of it is going to be maybe part of it. Yes. Yeah. This was like part of a eventual rollout to like create some sort of like more cohesive 360-degree media narrative.
I mean, that industry
around her wedding.
That industry is really major. I mean, there's always like some woman who becomes the face of like weddings and culture and lifestyle today. And that's what we mean by she's trying to escape Vanderpump Rules, is this was going to be her new identity. Like People Magazine, influencer, the whole lifestyle, 2.5 kids.
So in Forbes, she gives a pretty like long-ranging interview, of which I have condensed here, called Stassi Schroeder, Why Being Basic is Good Business. Now, this comes out February 27th, 2020, and it's always so fascinating to read these things from the first 3 months of 2020, because
I don't remember it
feels
all.
like 2020 literally is so like irreparably, unequivocally, irrevocably wrapped up with coronavirus that we forgot that there was like 2-3 months almost where people were still trying to like strive towards normalcy or not quite like grappling with like what was about to come
before everything changed. I also don't remember. I don't even remember this all happening in 2020. That's the crazy thing, because it felt so minuscule compared to like the real shit we were dealing with.
Yeah, well, I remember it quite acutely because there was like 1 million tweets about it, but we'll get to it.
Yeah,
so
of course.
She is talking to this writer, Kate Talbot. Matt, why don't you read for Kate and I'll read for Stassi?
Sounds good. One of the questions they ask is, what lesson do you have from writing your book, Next Level Basic?
I have learned that it is so important to be honest. Remember everything she says in this interview, because I've chosen it for a reason. So many people want to write things, whether it's a memoir, self-help, etc., and there's this urgent inclination to be aspirational, but aspirational isn't always the way to connect. I think people want to hear about success and how to be there, whether it's a relationship or in business. But I believe that by talking about your failures or in your embarrassing moments or times that you messed up, that's the biggest lesson I learned from writing a book.
Then Kate asks, how have people taken the message of embracing being basic in your book?
People come up to me and say, thank you for giving me the confidence just to be myself. If I want to go on a first date and talk about Harry Potter, I'm going to.
Kate then asks, what advice would you give to young women who are starting their journey, whether they want to start a podcast, be a writer, or anything that you've done in the spotlight?
Be committed and practice honesty. Honesty is the biggest thing when it comes to everything that you do, not even just pertaining to business, with relationships. I just feel like the more transparent you are, if you're starting a company, say something you sell, being transparent about what it is, I think is so important. Transparency in everything that you do. People want the truth. They don't want to be fooled. We don't have time for that anymore. So women trying to start anything, be authentic, be honest, be transparent.
Oh boy. Oh boy. I think she said transparent like 7 times.
Yeah. And I mean,
well.
So we are going to now just briefly bring in one Kristen Dowdy, who's going to play a much larger part in next week's episode. However, we're going to read a smaller excerpt of one we will get into much later. You know her as Crazy Kristen on Vanderpump Rules. Now she wants you to know her on her own terms. This comes at the beginning of June, literally the first week of June 2nd, 2020. This is in the Washington Post, and Kristen is also gearing up to write her own book, He's Making You Crazy. And it is now full-time press cycle for her. She had been promoting it in May. She starts promoting it in June. And she is really cycling up the press conference on this book. And it's all about how all the ex-boyfriends in her life have taught her lessons, whether it is about how men will make you crazy, how she acts crazy in certain relationships. She talks about domestic violence. She talks about her struggles with substances, I would say. But this is very interesting to note of how she describes herself on the show. For those of you who have never seen Vanderpump Rules or have not been listening to this podcast, Kristen is sort of known as Crazy Kristen. She is loud, boisterous. She famously gets cheated on by Tom Sandoval in the first 2 seasons with one Ariana Madix, but then also cheats on Tom Sandoval at the same time with Jax Taylor, and later gets with James Kennedy. She dates a variety of men on the show besides James Kennedy. They also have a very tumultuous and, as we are led to believe on the show, abusive relationships on both of their parts, and as she has said later, on his part. And I am using Kristen's own words there. Let me be clear about that. Views expressed by Christian.
More about that later.
I'm just saying for
the record.
For the record, for libelous reasons, we are just simply stating what it is that Kristen has said about the situation. So, in this interview, she says, quote, "I don't blame the show or anything for not showing the sides of me, because they have a story to tell, and there are a lot of cast members, especially this season, but I'm not a one-dimensional person." She is more broadly talking about the show not always showing, quote-unquote, the best sides of her, but also the fact that later on into her run on the show, going into season 9, she was actually friends with Ariana Madix. That is something that the show sort of brushes under the rug or ignores, and there's actually an interview with an editor that I watched on YouTube, and a story producer, where
oh yes, I know
they're talking about like one of the things that they wish they could have focused on going back, and one of the things that they wish they could have focused on was the fact that Kristen and Ariana were friends and had actually developed a really deep relationship, and that was sort of like left by the wayside, even though it was like an ultimately very compelling story that despite the circumstances of how they came into each other's lives, they ultimately like forged a friendship outside of Tom Sandoval. But that's very interesting because 2 days later, Vanderpump Rules former cast member Faye Stowers, and I'm getting this directly from People, quote, "On her experiences as the only Black cast member, it was a lot." So, in an interview that is not with People magazine, Faith starts to talk about amid uprisings of Black Americans and people in and around the Black Lives Matter movement after the death of George Floyd. And just for timeliness sake, for reference, George Floyd died May 25th, 2020 at the age of 46 in Minneapolis. And so this was like well within, I can't even do math, but like a week or two of that death.
About 2 weeks.
Yes. And very quickly protests had started, and that had sort of bled into also just conversations where people were having online. We were all there. We remember. So,
June, July, August was insane. Yeah.
So Faith is talking about this in an interview, and she is but one of many Black actresses, reality cast members, writers, authors, people sharing these experiences online that summer. And she says, quote, "I felt like after their friend did something that we were both involved in, that he's done like 1,000 times, they wanted to attack me instead of him." She's talking about Jax Taylor and the fact that a few seasons prior, she had been quote unquote outed as having an affair with Jax, quote unquote, next to a person in hospice. I think it was like a woman in her 70s from what I remember.
That is a very dark time.
It was very unclear the circumstances, and to be clear, like to this day, we don't really have the full story, nor am I like very interested in like litigating what it is that Faith had done. But interestingly enough, as you hear in my retelling of it, it once again comes back to actions that both challenge and run up against the sort of like hetero-patriarchal ideals of the people on Vanderpump Rules, where, for a show that began as a bunch of people fucking and sucking, it ultimately really becomes a show about the sanctity of marriage and the sanctity of like the hetero-patriarchal union between men and women. And a lot of the dynamics on that show revolve around people negotiating terms with that structure, fighting against that structure, inadvertently or not. I don't think anyone's like a crusader for non-monogamy on that show, like valiantly. I don't want to ascribe that, but just, you know what I mean? Like it's just this like constant sort of struggle around the idea, and all of the women that come onto this show are sort of measured up against a scale of purity for like how well they adhere to that, right? And to be clear, none of them are like saints, and those that say they are, and people talk about this with Ariana a lot. Well, she's no saint, but I don't think she's ever described herself as a saint either. That's like projection that you think that of her. But
exactly.
It's interesting. So she's talking about Jax, and she's talking about Kristen and Stassi and the women on that show who sort of turned on her after that came to light. So she's like, I feel like they were coming after me, and even though it was something that we both did, they wanted to attack me instead of him. And we've seen that on the show a million times, right? That Tom Schwartz pours a drink on Katie's head and everyone gets mad at Katie, Yeah,
except it's historically the men that are always the ones to initiate the cheatings, continue the cheating, lie about the cheating, work with each other to cover up the cheating.
Yeah. And not to diminish what Faith went to by any means, this is exacerbated by the fact that she is Black. That is like what exacerbates 100%. This treatment. And by their own admission much later, they were racist. And that was part of what motivated them to do this. But we'll get there. So, quote, they wanted to attack. I was wrong. I was this. I was that. Calling me names, etc. So, quote, I believe it hit the ceiling for me and made me really want to run for the hills when Kristen and Stassi decided they were going to call the cops on me. I had left the show at that point. I was invited back to tell my truth, but I decided it wasn't going to do anything for me. So I ended up not coming back. I decided to go over to MTV. Once I did that, I felt like they, meaning Stassi and Kristen and Jax, got upset with me.
Nope.
There was this article on Daily Mail where there was an African-American lady. It was a weird photo, so she looked very light-skinned and had these different weird tattoos. They showcased her, and I guess this woman was robbing people, and they called the cops and said it was me. This is like a true story. I heard this actually from Stassi during an interview.
It's so fucking crazy.
It's
that this
beyond
is where
the pale.
Actually, we've talked about this so many times. We literally lived through as this was happening in real time. But looking hindsight, you're like, there's no fucking way any of this was not crazy behavior.
I think also I say that this was everywhere at the time, this story, because I was writing at Jezebel at the time. And
you were deep in.
I was like posting stories about this every single day because the updates were endless, but also like there was 1 million articles in ET. There was 1 million tweets. There was 1 million Instagrams. People were like going back through the entirety of Vanderpump Rules, much like Scandal, actually. And I think that people seem to forget, I think oftentimes, that the reaction to what Kristen and Stassi did, deserved reaction, mind you, laid the foundation for the type of reaction to Scandal. That gets lost a lot. And that's really why I wanted to like expand upon it in a much greater detail this episode, because I think Faith's story deserves that. But I also think that like we see this reaction to Scandal where people are like acting like, Nancy Drews of a show that they already act like Nancy Drews about. And they're like combing for details, combing for tea, combing for lore. They're scrolling as far back as they can in these people's timelines, Instagram feeds. They're looking up old articles. They're looking at old interviews. They're going back and finding anything that they can. Yeah. And I think that sounds cynical, but it also is, I think, a deeply cynical thing, because I think for as much of a positive effect this has on people thinking twice before doing something heinous like this, I think that there is equally a large amount of people that we see during that time who quite cynically engaged with this movement, engaged with these uprisings, and very cynically used this moment as a way to get views, get clicks, drive engagement, because also, if you think about it, we were in lockdown. A lot of people were unemployed. And I think that there was really, it kind of felt like no better time for a bunch of people to spend every single waking minute they had combing through archives upon archives upon archives of Vanderpump Rules material.
I mean, this is around the time of like the Bon Appetit scandal.
Yes.
I mean, there's countless stories from summer of 2020 of people being like completely taken down from their platforms and raked over the coals for decades of tweets. The Bon Appetit thing. I know.
I haven't thought about Bon Appetit forever, but like
that was a nuclear bomb that
I know.
itself.
To this day, we were, me and my co-reporter on that story, Hazel Sills, got the first interview with Sola about that whole thing. And also, we broke a few pieces about that. I'll never forget, that was one of the only times I've ever engaged in like a breaking news arms race where like I was on the phone with Anna Wintour's assistant.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the phone with every single person I could. I was like up until all hours of the day.
Those emails you were getting were...
we all knew in the background of everything that there were other people sort of like on our tails.
Everyone
hot
was
on
ready
the
to
heels.
talk.
Yeah. And I find that, by the way, just to be clear, a very cynical way to engage with the news. Like I personally didn't enjoy it very much, but that was like, I would say one of the only times I've ever had to engage in that sort of reporting. And there's a reason why I don't do it anymore, because I did not enjoy it. I did not enjoy
it's kind of gross.
Feeling like I had to rush to like break a news scandal about workplace
like
abuse.
Oh, that's so terrible that happened to you. Can we get that live like within 2 hours?
Yeah, because like we need to get this out before Business Insider gets these people, or like such other Vulture or whatever gets their hands on these people, get their hands on these people. It's just like a cynical way to engage with the news. But also, interestingly, I will say, like, again, I do not want to in any way, shape, or form diminish this, but I just think that it is very interesting to see how, like, we saw this a lot with Me Too as well, right? Where, like, things that were happening wide out in the open, suddenly people that had, like, gleefully engaged with that content forever suddenly we're like, wait a minute, that was all bad. And I actually was party to all the bad stuff.
And like
I listened to all the bad stuff. I have an
Yeah.
archival knowledge of all the bad stuff this person has done. But like, yeah, you're right. It's actually bad. And here's all of the reasons why. And also, like, I mean, like, here's all the reasons I know why. Like, people, like, I remember being like, how the fuck did people find this Stassi, like random Stassi interview of like a random podcast where she says in like a minute-long clip in like the middle of some like deep back episode from 2018 that one time she called the cops on Faith Stowers, and why wasn't that a news story at the time if that was what she was saying? And like, it's because they listened to that podcast and they heard her say that. That's how they knew that.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like,
because there are
think
people
about
out here
that,
who are
actually.
listening to every single thing these people produce.
And we're not saints, okay? I'm sure we
mean,
could go back to
here
like
we are.
podcasts we could go. I'm sure that we could go back to podcasts we did 5 years ago and be like, oh God, we would do that totally differently. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm moralizing or anything, but it is just interesting to think about that like there was a lot of stuff in the ether that people were willfully engaging with and in consuming and listening to and being like, oh yeah, that's like an acceptable level of racism I'm willing to put up with. And then post that summer, when you can no longer just put up with it, when people are no longer going to just tolerate it, it sort of was like, it felt like people were like turning in the evidence they had on themselves, like sort of like
Turning in
offering
their
it
own
up
guns.
to, yeah, where they're like, okay, so I'm going to reveal that I am an avid listener of all of Stassi's podcast content, and I'm going to share this knowledge with you.
Here's when she was
Please
racist.
let me be spared.
X, Y,
Yeah,
and
please
Z,
let me
but
be spared.
I only know this because I literally pay for the subscription for the bonus
That's
content.
it's just interesting. It's interesting to think about. Like, I would say we engaged with Vanderpump Rules as critics. We did not engage with Vanderpump Rules as like avid.
I certainly wasn't buying their
who are
merch
like,
or going to
"No."
their shows or like, yeah, I never thought anyone here was aspirational in these slightest.
And some of this stuff like happened before I was ever like a serious reporter, because probably if I had been reporting at that time, I can't go back and say like if I would have cared about it, but it certainly would have maybe caught my attention a little bit faster, because there's so many things we do on this podcast where like I go back to like, I mean, we saw this with like the Jonas Brothers thing or the Ariana Grande and Selena Gomez and Justin Bieber stuff, where we go back and we read stuff from like 2009 And we're like, how the fuck was anyone
It's
okay with this?
Fucking horrifying.
Like, this is
actually
heinous.
Even that video we watched of Andy Cohen in like 2006, it was like some
Yes.
Webby TV before it was even a thing interview, and all the comments in the video are 15 years old and they're all like, I can't believe another gay man is gonna be on my television, like, get this faggot off my screen. I'm like, 2009, 2006, 2007, like, we are that okay, damn. Like,
Yeah.
didn't realize you were concerned.
So almost very quickly, I don't want to say immediately because it is not immediately, but Faith gives these comments and they don't get picked up for a few days. But once they get picked up and sort of blasted out across the
Once the
internet,
Reddit
on
forums
the
get on it,
blogosphere,
honey.
Reddit, Twitter,
Yeah.
etc., Instagram, etc., Variety and a bunch of other news sources. I'm getting this from Variety on the 9th of June, announced that Stassi and Kristen have been fired for their racist actions. So, quote, 1 week after former Vanderpump Rules cast members Faith Stour revealed that 2 of the original cast members had reported her to the police for a crime that she had nothing to do with, a Bravo spokesperson confirmed to Variety that Schroeder and Dowdy won't return to the show. Additionally, new cast members Max Boyens and Brett Caprioni, whose past racist tweets were uncovered after their most recent season premiered in January, also will not return. On Tuesday, Bravo issued a statement saying, quote, Bravo and Evolution Media confirmed today that Stassi Schroeder, Kristen Dowdy, Max Boyens, and Brett Caprioni will not return to Vanderpump Rules. As Variety also reports, around the same time, Stassi gets dropped from UTA. She also gets dropped by Metro Public Relations. She also, Dowdy, is represented by Fuse Literary, and that is her book agency. They cut ties with her as well. And that podcast appearance that I mentioned, 2018, where Stassi joked about this, was the Bitch Bible podcast. Around the same time, Kristen had also tweeted a link to an article that Faith had mentioned in that interview and tweets, quote, Hey, tweeties, doesn't this #pump rules thief look familiar? Someone put her on MTV and gave her a platform for press. I didn't want to go there, but I'm going there. And that is in response to Faith getting on MTV, where she would go on to compete on shows like The Challenge. So it's interesting to hear, and I just want to quickly note about this. One of the things that Faith, I think, correctly engages with, and I want people to really hold it close to their hearts, is that she correctly identifies that the women of Vanderpump Rules are mad with her, same with Jax, that not only did she come in and descend on them with this scandal, but that then she took herself out of the narrative and deprived them of a storyline on the show that would have been a ratings bonanza. I mean,
where have we seen that before? Mayhaps.
Where have we seen that before? That's such a good question. You know, I can't remember the last time a woman who was widely
Destroyed.
crucified on the internet for her behavior on Vanderpump Rules opted out of Vanderpump Rules and was crucified for that decision by the cast members that remained on the show. I've actually never heard that story before.
Almost like nothing changes.
And this is what I also mean about the sort of escape velocity needed to leave Vanderpump Rules. Part of the reason why
Slight
they cannot
speed is the requirement, I think.
is because people refuse to disengage from the vessel that prints money for them. Because like, if you are constantly plugged into a machine that you have to feed drama into for money to come out, if you deprive the machine of money, if you deprive the machine of drama,
yeah.
the money stops. And so you can try to leave, but you're taking a gamble that nice comfy paycheck that you just feed drama into the machine for every year is going to, it's all going to work out for you. And usually it doesn't. We've seen it not work out. We've seen them try so desperately. And also part of it, if I'm going to be more clear here, is that like, the wider public perception of these shows is that they are trashy. So if you have to feed the machine drama to get money and then make your life a mess,
incinerator, basically.
Yes. To get the money, then the more drama you put into it, the less employable it makes you to the wider world. But you're trying to get to the wider world. So you're negotiating like how much drama you're allowed to engage with on TV.
How much
before
garbage can I produce
so
the machine doesn't eat me alive?
Yeah. And so like we see
very
that
capitalism, really.
we see that truly how Ariana Madix is a exceptional woman and an exceptional use case on this show. Use case might not be the word, but just like an exceptional example on this show of somebody who like deprived the machine of drama and still managed to leave. Like she has not done the podcasting tour where she spills every little secret. She is not engaged with the like horde of assistants and friends of and enemies and lovers and ex-boyfriends and whatnot who have gone on to make $1 million off of her story.
And she's not even doing anything.
Mind you, they are all taking home like $10,000 from the merch lines and the podcast deals. Like they're not getting rich from this, but like there's money floating around for all of that.
Yeah.
She's not engaging in the petty back and forth. She's not posting daily Instagram like oh, she's going off on Instagram
she's not doing
stories.
Instagram
she's not
story
engaging with
teas.
that.
She's not doing
and
lives.
Look at
she's
her.
not even giving us
go.
she's not even giving us drama on the show this season. She's just like rolling her eyes and like scoffing.
Shooting into the she's shooting like an astronaut into the stratosphere with this whole shit. Like she's on Love Island, she's on Broadway, she's getting deals, she got a book out, she has all of it going for her, and they cannot handle it. They literally cannot.
She's building a space
it.
elevator, mama, and she's building that like satellite orbit. She's like,
getting,
you're not taking me back to this Earth.
She's getting flung into space.
Trash Island will not consume me again.
She's like in the 3-body problem where they're like, what if we strapped 1 million nuclear bombs to the back of a solar sail?
Exactly. And it's working.
It's working for her. We're in the 3-body problem that doesn't work. This is the use case where it does. I'm just going to say use case a lot this episode. So does that all make sense to you, though? Does that make sense? Did that track for you?
I follow it all completely. I absolutely do. I do think we have to say, of course, generally the biggest discrepancy with this entire fallout is Faith gets absolutely nothing from anybody.
Nothing from it. Nothing. No. And obviously
it's a very different story. It's a very different story. But
she was a friend of, to be clear. She does go on to have a reality TV career outside of Vanderpump Rules. I think that is not for nothing. I also think, though, that like we really see here how like even the metrics we use to grade this are inherently flawed, because when a Black woman enters the picture, all of those rules that we have established go out the window.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
like Faith is not enriched by what happens to her. Much like I would say Rachel Leviss to a much worse degree for Faith, I would say. Like Rachel has got a podcast deal out of it. She's going to the iHeartRadio Music Awards. She's at least getting attention and some measure of like public sympathy for what happened. Yeah. Faith has this moment tied to uprisings across the country against anti-Blackness in America, but that doesn't persist for her in the long term. Now, I don't want to put words in Faith's mouth. I think what Faith did was unbelievably brave, because Bravo has historically never done right by the Black people on its network. But I think that like there is something to be said for the fact that like there is this sudden inflammation of the fandom and this extreme sort of like collective eye turn to what she went through, but that doesn't sustain itself the same way that like something like Scandal did.
No.
When like in Faith's case, the cops were called on her. Yeah. Like literally, they called the cops on her over a lie, over a story. By the way, we're not going to show the photo. I don't want to be exploitative of this story any more than we probably are just even by talking about it. But that Daily Mail photo,
it's
looks
fucking ridiculous.
Nothing like Faith.
Oh, it's disgusting.
Like it's pure racism. It is pure unadulterated racism.
It reminds me so much of the type of racism you would see like in school that would happen, where people really are just like, this is a stereotype. We're just going to pin this on you because we like tee hee ha ha over literally violently like attacking you and basically taking advantage of you.
So would it surprise you that Brittany Cartwright indirectly leads to her own husband getting fired from Vanderpump Rules by engaging with people rightfully criticizing him for also having tweeted similar things on the internet in her Instagram comments? So in the replies of Brittany's, and this is where this podcast really enters like,
I know.
The deepest layer of hell. This is all happening in the comment section of Britney's Blackout Tuesday post. For those of you who don't know Blackout Tuesday, it was the black squares on Instagram. So this entire exchange happens in her Blackout Tuesday Instagram comment section.
Honestly, we're fucking L's at this point.
She says in the response, a person posts, quote, "Can you please address the racism regarding Faith Stowers, especially about her hair, etc., as well as the complicit support of the cops being called on her?" Brittany responds, I had nothing to do with that. She knows I don't have a racist bone in my body. She hurt me really bad and never once apologized. I haven't spoken to her since the night I found out Jax cheated, and I did not say anything about her hair. I yelled at her and did that rightfully so, like any other human being would if they had just found out what I did. Even if she ever tried one time to apologize to me, I could have forgiven her like I did Jax, but she never did or even showed remorse for how bad she hurt me. She also says that she's never been nothing but nice and kind to her up until that point. I had nothing to do with any cops. She knows I have never once spoken publicly about her. It's a shame I'm getting dragged into this when I have never been able to move on with my life.
See, now, let's just say this is 100% true and you and Jax knew nothing. Let's just say that happened. You really care way more about her not apologizing to you for Jax cheating, that nothing that happened to her even matters. Like, no, who cares? This is like, she legitimately said, "Can you please address the racism?" And she said, "She never apologized to me. She's a horrible person." It's like, that's not what I asked about. That's not what we're talking about.
What her post is essentially
This is a little bit bigger than that.
I feel nothing for what she went through because my pain is worse than structural racism that she was subjected to, irregardless of the cheating. Regardless of the cheating. Regardless of the cheating.
It had an irregardless vibe, though.
It had an irregardless vibe. But yeah, no, like, she's saying that my pain matters more. My pain matters more than Faith's.
Yeah.
My experience
like, this is exactly what we're talking
Faith.
about. This is why we're here.
Mind you, like, for however our own thoughts are about Blackout Tuesday, we can at least admit that, like, the attempt was to, like, acknowledge that your feelings are not universal.
Yes,
and
exactly
that maybe it is time for white people in this country to place other people's feelings and experiences before our own perceptions of reality. And in that very same post,
it's insane.
She's like,
it's so crazy.
Her experiences are invalid because my pain is worse. It's like, almost like too rich.
I was about to say, like, you have to laugh because you would have to cry otherwise, because it is the absolute definition of the hypocrisy.
So, of course, immediately as the story is breaking, it comes out that Jax Taylor also accused her of committing the same crime in a tweet in December 2017. Page 6 has this, but it was everywhere. Quote,
"It's still up right now, by the way. This tweet is still up."
After a fan asked Taylor if Faith would have permanently appear on Bravo, he wrote, quote, "She's wanted by the police for grand theft auto and AWOL from military. Bad idea to be on a reality show, dude. Someone's going to jail."
Like, bitch, what the fuck are you talking about?
Like, your husband,
yes,
3 years ago, accused her of being a felon and wanted by the police, and that she was going to prison.
AWOL from the military.
And your response to that is, "Fuck her, my feelings are more valid." Right hell. God, it's disgusting. So Faith reveals as the firings, remember, this is all happening in like 3 days. She says, quote, "I feel so vindicated. Studios and productions are able to see blatant racism and make these positive changes and help move the race forward, help the fight forward." She added that just before she heard the news of the firing, she had been praying for a family member. Quote, "I was in the middle of prayer and I felt a sense of," I know it sounds corny, "I felt a sense of glory. I felt God's presence, and I'm seeing now that the news has been revealed, maybe that it was what it was. He gave me a sign of optimism meant to be hopeful and showing me that all of this was worth it. I was ready to put myself in the line of fire because I didn't know what will happen if I didn't say anything, but I'm glad I did. Now I'm seeing Bravo follow suit, the same as MTV and The Challenge, by letting go of castmates that have also made racist remarks. Bravo is releasing women that have given them crazy ratings because they want to be on the right side of history. And I'm seeing that people are finally hearing us." And it is tragic to read that, specifically this line. Bravo is releasing women that have given them crazy ratings because they want to be on the right side of history. Matt, what is on Bravo right now?
The show that we are
currently
covering
episode 3.
The show we're talking about on our Patreon, The Valley, starring literally 2 out of 3 of these people that were fired.
Yeah.
And they don't even address it in the slightest. Not even a quick little, I've learned.
I haven't seen last night's The Valley, but I pray to God one of them checks Kristen for her whole she's a racist, insane storyline with
that's
Kristen.
currently what's happening in the episode.
Kristen, do you remember why you didn't have a job for 4 years?
Yeah, Lily, in The Valley, you guys, there was an entire story when the non-Vanderpump Rules people on the show that they are secretly a Republican and secretly
and racist. No, racist.
Yeah,
is the word that's important there. And it is Kristen leading the charge against racism on The Valley.
Oh boy!
How times have turned. How times have changed. How the world keeps turning. So later that week, Faith says that Jax Taylor should also be reprimanded, and Stassi and Kristen hire a crisis management rep for themselves.
I mean, what else is there to do?
So almost immediately, though, a week later, it comes out in People magazine that Stassi Schroeder is expecting her first child with fiancé Beau Clark. And that is something we are going to come back to in a few stories. But remember that, because you might be thinking, did she really use her baby to deflect from what is happening with the racism scandal? And the jury is still out on that. So, Matt.
Yeah.
Let us get into the story about Kristen Dowdy speaks out in first interview since Vanderpump Rules firing. This is in July 15th, 2020. We're getting this from E! She has really been actually the first person to say anything at all, and she says it a month later. Stassi waits until September to give an interview, and I would say this works out poorly for Kristen to be the first person to say anything.
Yeah.
Because of course she is hot-headed, impulsive, bad at expressing herself, and generally has pretty shitty opinions. And so everything she says is the wrong thing.
Yep.
Why don't you focus on reading the quotes, starting with that second bullet point?
Yeah. She says, quote, "I've never got to speak to anyone, which is really hard because I would have liked to have a conversation." And by anyone, she means the cast, and I believe Faith as well.
And Bravo specifically,
Bravo,
when they told her, they like basically unceremoniously dump her, and she's like, no one ever let me talk to them.
Exactly. She says, quote, "In turn, I really wish that they would have talked about this publicly." She also talks about how they admitted that the following weeks they were really emotional. Quote, "I wasn't doing that well. I think I was just really all over the place. I'm not used to being silenced. And it was a lot to take in that people had a certain perception of me that I didn't hold myself. And sprinkled in there was like drinking and crying to begin with, you know, if I'm going to be super honest about it." She also talks about how she used time to reflect on conversations. This is again from consulting resources and watching TED Talks and trying to stay off social media. The TED Talks part is like, I can't even.
I love how E structures that sentence. Use this time to reflect by having conversations, consulting resources, watching TED Talks, and trying to stay off social media.
It's a routine many could honestly benefit from. So Kristen says to E, quote, "And then shortly thereafter, I just started listening because I was having honest conversations with a lot of my friends. And specifically, you know, to be honest, my Black friends, and they told me to shut up and listen. So that's exactly what I did. I could literally sit here and tell you how moment by moment that it wasn't that I called the police on her or called 911 or gave her information, but I actually called a tip line and left my name and number in which no one ever even called me back and nothing ever happened. But then it's like, what does that even matter?" That is crazy that she's like, I didn't really call the police. I just called a tip line and they never got back to me. It's actually the failure of the system that caused the issue.
Yeah, okay. This is the thing too, where they really like litigate it.
Yes.
Where they're like, well, we didn't like call the police. We called a tip line for the police.
And it's like, this is again how you are proving to us you don't know anything about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it gets worse. When asked about the mistakes that she's made through the whole experience, Dottie says to E, quote, "I've definitely been known, like in the past, to be a very reactive rather than responsive. It was definitely none of my business to take anything to social media, essentially send a mob out, to this person, especially to be honest." She says this so much, like she pauses to say, especially to be honest, especially because she's Black. You know what I mean? Regardless, it really was just not my place to go out there. And then I believe Stassi says this.
No, she says this. She says this about her relationship with Stassi.
About her relationship with Stassi. Thank you. "I'm sorry that, it's all happening at this time, but I'm so happy for her and Beau. She's pregnant. It's crazy. She's pregnant. She's been my best friend for 10 years. So yeah, she's pregnant with her little baby girl, and I'm just trying to be there to support her. And she's been doing the same for me. I've seen her a couple of times. I think everyone knows that. I was grateful that she kind of let me in on the news earlier, and I just want to try to keep her calm and keep her happy and keep the baby healthy and happy. Like I said earlier, there are good days and there are bad days. Some days I wake up crying and have to force myself out of bed and be like, this isn't the end of your world because you're dropped from a show or things were taken away from you. Like, it was a consequence to an action, and that's that. So I'm just trying to learn more, do better, and be better." She ends here by saying as well, quote, "I feel like that's the best way for me to sort of channel and show the work, because we've been working with different companies and different charities, specifically Black women's fashion, like fashion entrepreneurs and things like that, and donating to them and creating a protest collection with a Black graphic designer. And then, giving the proceeds to that. So it's all those things on top of listening and learning, but donating and taking action. At the end of the day, you guys, I'm not a fucking saint. I'm just doing the best I can. I'm human. I make mistakes all the time. And I'm just trying to do something every day that is making this a little better for everyone."
Rock and roll.
Rock and fucking roll. That
Rock
is
and fucking roll.
It's the hardest thing to read, because I'm just I could just hear her rolling her eyes almost as she says.
So would it surprise you? Now, would you say Vanderpump Rules cast members have a history of off the show, outside of prying eyes of the cameras, hanging out with their fellow cast members who have recently been destructively canceled on the internet?
I could definitely say that's something I see maybe every week on Reddit and other forums, yes.
Yeah. Would it shock you that Stassi and Beau take a vacation with the cast of Vanderpump Rules amid their racism scandal and firing?
It would not shock me in the slightest. Is that what happened?
It wouldn't shock you?
Is that what happened?
Are you sure it wouldn't shock you?
No, it would not shock me.
Well, it happens. To be specific, Lala, Katie Schwartz, Randall, Jax Taylor, and Beau,
literally all of them,
take a houseboat trip with Stassi and Beau on a houseboat.
I do need to know what happened on that boat. I need to know the conversations.
I think we know what happened, and I don't think we're allowed to say it on the internet.
I don't think we want to know either.
So, okay. Lala joins the fray that August 6th. We're going to get back to this interview next week because it also has to do with her and Randall Emmett's relationship, which will be the topic next week.
Mm-hmm.
But for this purpose, we're just going to talk about her reaction in this piece. She is one of the other first people to say something about this. And she says this to E.T., quote, "I said this the other day and people thought it was very odd, but it's almost like when someone's a part of you and they're not gone forever, but it's a change and you almost feel this weird loss." This is about her, quote, processing Stassi and Kirsten's departures. The cast reportedly found out about the firings at the time as viewers, end quote. "It hasn't sunk in yet because it hasn't. We haven't started filming, so I don't know what it's going to be like, but I does feel a little part of me is missing because we have so much history, good and bad, and we've been through a lot together. So, it just fully hasn't hit me yet. Black Lives Matter, since this movement started, has always been near and dear to my heart. I like to say that I'm educated, but I don't think we could ever be educated enough. Well, not educated enough to say that the spirit of Tupac isn't possessing you."
I was about to say.
Or that you're from the streets, or that you're going to pop people,
1 or 2 years
whatever,
before
what have
this.
you.
Yes.
So my main thing is, when we do start filming, I don't want to speak for someone else. I don't think it's right for me to be a mouthpiece for Kristen or Stassi. I can explain how I feel about the movement and what I've tried to contribute to this movement, but as far as talking about them, I can't speak for the rest of my cast. I'm steering clear of that. I don't feel right about talking for someone else when they're not there to actually describe their thoughts and processes. Now, that's certainly something that Lala has never done. Yes. Talked for someone else.
They're like, for this topic, though, we'll hold that standard.
For racism, I'll keep my mouth shut.
I love the things I've tried to contribute to the movement is very
I would love to know what that was. So, quote, I haven't. Okay, so then she's talking about Lisa Vanderpump. You know, Villa Blanca, by the way, or Villa Rosa, excuse me. I was told once that before they carved in Villa Rosa, the original name of Villa Rosa was Misogyny Manor. Quote, I haven't seen any type of hate or ill will for any specific race or gender or sexuality when it comes to Lisa Vanderpump.
Kiss the ring.
I think definitely gender. I think Lisa quite obviously
and
hates
sexuality
women.
As well.
And sexuality. I also think Lisa, I think there was a season with Billy where you headbutted her, Lala, and Lisa agreed with you headbutting her.
Also, season 4 of Beverly Hills. In general. And the castmates that joined and left promptly because of the racism they're experiencing. But
quote, again, I think people have to speak for themselves. I haven't witnessed anything with her, but when something like this happens, a movement like this happens, which is very much needed, just like with the Me Too movement was very much needed, people have to speak for themselves. I don't want anyone else speaking for me or on something like this, so I'm not going to speak for anyone else. She also talks about how she exited the show in season 5. Faith exited the show in season 5 after it was revealed that Jax Taylor had slept with her while he was with Brittany Cartwright, etc. Lala, who previously described Faith as her best friend, says that she stopped speaking with Faith, but that in 2018, Faith had reached out to her after Lala's father had died, which we discussed in our last episode, I believe. Mm-hmm. So, quote, that's how the line of communication was opened. And then after hearing how she left the show, you know, there's been a lot of people who have come onto the show and then not been on the show. And for me, whatever the reason may be that you didn't return, I never want anyone to leave Vanderpump Rules with a pit in their stomach because I know that feeling. I know the feeling of being scarred by an event. And every time it's mentioned, you get that heaviness. And so I really just wanted to call to apologize for sending her off with that feeling, you know, and she was very receptive. She basically says that she apologized to Faith over the phone about what Faith went through. Wow. And I take her word for this because Faith seems to agree with this, just in what she has said about Lala. Quote, no matter what anyone thinks, people tend to have amnesia with things like this. If you watch that season 4, you know all the episodes. Faith and I were thick. She was my best friend. We had sleepovers every single night. Like, that was my girl. And then when things went south, she's like me. She's a runner. You know, I did that too. When things got hot for me, I ran back to Utah. She did the same type of thing, so I can understand that. But it was when she reached out to me about my dad, that was when anybody, I don't care what we've been through. If you reached out to me about my dad, our slate was clean and we could start from square one. And that's that like very black and white thinking that Lala always has about everything.
She's very ride or die. Yeah.
Where she's ride or die, maybe, but I was going to say just like very much like she's like this and that, true and false, right and wrong.
Yeah.
You reached out to me about my dad, you're cool in my book. And that line is always changing, but it's like a very like black and white way of seeing like a line down the middle through her life. Right and wrong side of her life, and everyone is always sort of like on those two sides of the line for her. And for this, it was with her dad. She was on the right side of it with her dad, so she's in the right books with me. So, did you watch this interview, Stassi on Tamron Hall?
No, I actually did not.
So Stassi goes on the Tamron Hall show, and
I saw clips when it came out, but I have not seen since.
Yeah, I would say everyone should watch this. We can't play clips on our podcast because they will flag us, but in a September 17th appearance on the Tamron Hall show, she says that, you know, she was a Karen and that she had a really hard time being labeled as a racist, but that she's being like open and honest, learning and receptive. I hired a diversity coach. I'm getting this from E, but the notes I also got were from actually her appearance on the show. One of the things she says is, quote, throughout the whole thing, I recognized that I never felt I was racist. I don't have hate in my heart, but I recognize that I was an anti-racist. I wasn't. And that's something I've been learning through all of this. I just want to be a better person. I'm pregnant. I want my daughter to be proud of me. And I want to be part of the solution. I've been part of the problem for years now, and I've recognized that. That's why I say I don't feel like a victim of cancel culture. People want me to be mad at it, and I'm not. I needed it. I'm someone who has messed up quite a few times. I'm the reason why I'm in this situation. I think a lot of people wanted me to focus on cancel culture and whether I was a victim or not, and it's just not how I feel at all. And that's interesting. So,
I mean, yeah, I agree.
I would agree. But also what's interesting is that like we even see how the cancel culture brigade that was like just spinning up into full force in 2020 had even focused on Stassi Schroeder's cancellation. Like they were paying attention to what she was doing. And I almost bet you those Instagram comments and DMs that she was getting from her followers and fans were like, you're being unfairly targeted. We love you anyways. Da, da, da. Because she's gone on to still have a career. She still has the podcast. She still goes on tours with Beau. She apparently makes enough money on Patreon to support herself in that giant, like, palatial Hollywood Hills
her
home
house
that they
is
live in.
Huge. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is like clearly that has like been enough, right? Like we can imagine what her fan base was using, but it is smart for her. I will say the crisis PR works because she correctly identifies that like I'm not going to align myself with the cancel culture people because that will be bad for my re-entry into society.
What? Just on a personal level, it will save you because that is the worst route you can go when you are quote unquote canceled in the media.
If I'm speaking purely cynical here too, the cancel culture people will also cheapen your brand because you start to be associated with like absolute fucking Looney Tunes. Like
you might make more money, but you will turn rotten on the inside.
Free crisis PR advice. If you ever get a bunch of cancel culture people in your corner telling you what to say and what to do, worst thing you could possibly do is align yourselves with them because do not listen. Aside from the racism, aside from the scandal, aside from the smell of that room, they will just cheapen your brand.
Yeah.
They're not glamorous. They're not interesting. They're not smart. They don't have media savvy. They don't have friends that are going to get you back on TV. They don't have the sort of power that is going to like really re-enter you into the A-list that you want to be on. Like I'm saying that cynically, but also I am cynical about this because clearly these are points that have been massaged into Stassi by this crisis PR firm her and Kristen have hired. And I think she is utilized to greater effect. Notice how she waited until September. And one of the things that she says is like,
waiting is
people
always
really
the best
wanted
solution.
me to address it right away. But like, I didn't want to. I wanted to take time. I was really overwhelmed. And like, I just didn't know how it was all these things coming at me. And I didn't want to say the wrong thing. You know, part of all this is like listening. And the concept of race that I'm being told are just like so big. It's so big. There's so much I have to learn that like, it just took me a while to learn all of it, you know, but I'm learning, I'm listening.
So I mean, what our pod has definitely taught us is that waiting is really the best card you could play in a cynical way, but yes.
Yeah. So she talks about this teacher that she has. Matt, why don't you start reading from that quote I've got highlighted there?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Quote, there was so much that I didn't know, I didn't understand, that just because something wasn't about race for me doesn't mean it's not about race for the other person, because I'm bringing my experience as a white privileged woman to the situation, and she's bringing her experience as a black woman into the situation. And because it's about race for her, it is about race. And that's something I've realized. Yeah.
She also talks about the Oscars So White campaign in 2017, the backlash that she also received for saying that, which we talked about at the time. She received backlash for that at the time.
But it's definitely coming back up 10 times over now.
She says, quote, I was a Karen who basically said, but what about all lives matter? Basically like proving the point of the Black Lives Matter and the Oscars So White people. She also talks about her, quote, Nazi chic Instagram story.
Why is this like always something that happens in Hollywood where there's just like someone dressing up as like a Nazi or using it as like funny jokes and stuff?
She later captioned it Indiana Jones chic, but at the time she says, quote, I'm so embarrassed. I've been so embarrassed about that for 3 years. It was a poor joke amongst me and my friends, and it was so wrong. Now, when asked about if she would ever return to Vanderpump Rules, she says what?
Quote, that ship has sailed. My life feels very different right now. And I think when something like this happens and you get pregnant on top of it, you take inventory of your life and you think, what is going to be the best for my future child? And I think getting drunk and starting conflict and misbehaving on a reality show isn't my journey anymore.
No. So all of this is good. All of this makes sense. All of this is like, okay, I can see how maybe you have like learned your lesson.
It comes
here.
off well. It does. She doesn't
But what do
necessarily
you
say
think
anything terrible.
What do you think happens the next day?
Something to burst the bubble that we're in right now.
Yeah. So, an interview comes out with a source, unnamed, but I have a theory. And I'm going to read this before I say my theory.
Okay.
How Stassi Schroeder really felt about her, quote, awkward interview with Tamron Hall exclusive.
Oh,
This
yikes.
is the very next day
Like
in
a
Us
smooth
Weekly.
24 hours. Oh.
Stassi felt totally unprepared for the interview. She wasn't
Jesus.
in a good mood afterward and felt like she was put on the spot. She has built her brand on being candid and funny, but she feels to make any wrong comments or jokes and having them come across negatively, which in turn made the interview awkward. She doesn't want to make a wrong move or say anything that can be taken out of context because she has really been taking time to work on herself. She felt somewhat caught off guard in how the interview went down because she has been doing her best to learn, educate herself, and be the best version of herself that she can be. The second source says, quote, producers laid the segments out for Stassi and her team and everything was all set. And then to everyone's surprise, Tamron went rogue and took the interview in a completely different direction.
This is like, if you guys have been listening for a long time, this is like the Olympics of PR statements.
Yeah.
This is using all the tricks in the book.
This is the way. And then to everyone's surprise, Tamron went rogue and took the interview in a completely different direction.
This is so loaded. This is so strategic in a way that is like genuinely frightening.
Matt, tell me how you think it is strategic, because you probably know what I'm going to say, but I want to hear your opinions.
Well, one, immediately Tamron Hall is like segregated quite literally from everyone. They listed everyone's surprised. So producers on the show and Stassi and her team, everyone's surprised. So Tamron Hall went rogue, demonizing her, punishing her. It's also obviously preparing for the possibility of something to be taken out of context. And by giving a backstory to, she's so afraid, it's all new for her. This is a way that we can basically prepare for the bomb that might go off in a few days. The thing I'm like trying to wrap my head around this sentence right here. Again, reading this word for word, just so we're on the same page. She felt somewhat caught off guard in how the interview went down because she really has been doing her best to learn, educate herself, and be the best version of herself that she can be. If that is not such emotionally loaded, like completely unobjective statement to make, I'm trying to understand what that is even trying to say.
Okay, not only do I have the greatest podcast co-host in the entire world, I love you. You literally pull thoughts right out of my mind so I don't have to say them myself. Okay, so here's what I think is happening here. I think if I was to make an educated guess, let's hypothesize. Let's hypothesize that this is crisis PR.
Mama, let's hypothesize.
Right? This does a few things, okay? It isn't directly accusatory in the sense that, like, it is not specifically stating which questions went rogue, which questions caught off guard, how it caught her off guard, etc. It's vague. It's keeping it vague because what it is
felt unprepared, but she also has been doing all this work to be prepared.
Yeah, what it is trying to do in my hypothetical scenario, that is purely hypothetical, is set up a world where people react negatively to the interview by preparing them and saying, if you feel badly about how this goes, or you seem it's uncomfortable, or Stassi isn't coming off the way we want her to, don't worry. She feels the same way. She's really been trying, and she feels like the interview was unfair, or not even unfair. She just like wasn't prepared for the questions that she was going to be asked, but like she's trying so hard. So that's one part of it, right? One part of it is like, guys, before you bring out the pitchforks, like, she's on your side. She gets it. Yeah. She also thinks she came off awkward. Because she turns it back on herself too. I was unprepared. I felt nervous. I felt uncomfortable. I was out of my element. I can't crack jokes. I don't want to be perceived as not taking it seriously.
This is like writing the line so hard.
I get it. But on the flip side, remember how she tried to distance herself from cancel culture? Remember how she tried to distance herself from the people that wanted her to buy into the cancel culture narrative? What it's also doing is greasing the slide for people who are willing and ready and able to be mad about the fact she's getting interviewed at this at all and be defensive for her. She's sort of greasing that slide to be like, man, wasn't Tamron Hall such a bully? didn't she really get so unfair with Stassi? Like,
it's not her
writing
world.
that
This is
line-
new for Stassi. This is
But
not
but
her
also
wheelhouse.
like she went rogue. She lied to Stassi. She just wanted to trick Stassi into looking bad. It's not saying that directly, but it's greasing the slide for the people who are going to read it that way,
it's so
regardless.
nasty. It's so nasty.
It is.
It actually
trying to
really did
have
suck up
both at once.
It's sucking like the tiny amount of good faith that we possibly had in her statements earlier, and like
it's pure. It is
right back
purely
out.
there to like ride both sides of the fence and game both of the reactions.
Because
I don't
that's
think
how you
it's
win.
a smart move, but it works for her because guess who still has a career? Guess who still makes money for this?
Yes.
Guess who sustains herself through all of the scrutiny and still has like a functioning podcast and a functioning Patreon and all of these things. I'm not here to litigate whether those should have been taken away from her. That's not my job.
It's also like
I don't
irrelevant
speak
at
for
this
everybody.
point. Yeah.
It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
But it is just fascinating to see in real time how she wants the cake and eats it too. And she doesn't want to have any sort of responsibility for doing either of those things. It's fascinating. So I have one thing else about this. Tamron Hall speaks out about her interview with former Vanderpump Rules star Stassi Schroeder. This is in Variety. This is a few days later on the 22nd of September. This is in Hall's opening remarks of her show. She says, quote, she like basically is like, listen guys, I want to be honest with you. I actually thought my interview with Stassi went very well. I thought it was good. I thought she was so gracious and I thought that she was really going there. And she even admits, I was uncomfortable with the fact that she was pregnant. I don't want to have to place her baby in harm's way by like getting her villainized on the internet. I wasn't there to like get her. I wasn't there to demonize her. I really wanted to get to the truth. She wanted to have this open conversation with me. And she even says multiple times that like she essentially was proud of Schroeder for how she handled herself in the interview. She's like, for all intents and purposes, it was a rather good interview for what I was expecting.
That's why the went rogue comment is like,
and yeah, she's like, I thought worse of her going into it. And I went out thinking like, wow, she really held her own. She was there. She answered my questions. She really went there. She took accountability. She apologized, all of these things. She's like laying this out. And she's like, so imagine my surprise when I see something like saying that she felt she did a bad job or she felt surprised by me or ambushed by me when I left the interview surprised by her.
See, this is
so wait.
It's so infuriating.
I know. So she says, quote, I don't tell people the specific questions I'm going to ask them. How they answer, that's up to them. But the topic and everything we discussed, Stassi knew. She knew the subject matter. She knew what I was going to ask her, not the questions. I want to be honest with you. Given that she was 5 months pregnant, the issue of race was hard enough for her and for me, and there was a lot to unpack. So I said we're not going to go down that road, but we would have this difficult conversation that we all should have to provide a better platform for our children. And this really kind of gave me some respect for Hall because I was just like, damn, like to have.
She was like, I was fucking real.
To have that level of grace for somebody that like has just trashed your show even through like a third party anonymously is like, I couldn't do it. I could not do it. I would have fully launched the nukes at her.
She took the high road. She was like, I was respectful and I did my own thing.
So
that's
Kristen
a shame.
Dowdy. Oh, Kristen. She
does not have the right PR team, that's for sure.
No, she does not take their advice. You see someone who is media trained and really takes seriously getting back into her job and getting her career and life back. Kristen is like, speaking of launching the nukes, she's
strapped on top of one of them, I think.
Yeah, she's actually, wait, how far into the three body problem series have you read?
Bitch, I read all of them.
Oh, you read all of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Remember how there's like that thing of like the mutually assured destruction? Like the concept of mutually assured destruction does not enter Kristen's mind because she has one word going and it's destruction.
Yeah,
she's
exactly.
She's like, broadcast our signal out into the universe. I don't care if we get blown up. I don't give a fuck. So that's fascinating too. And I say this because considering next week's subject material, isn't it crazy? Just like how high and low we get with all of this, how like we have these people that make the worst possible choices and then navigate the worst possible things happening to them, and like the feelings about both of those things having to exist at the same time, is ultimately like all the beauty and all the tragedy and all the rage of Vanderpump Rules, like wrapped up into like just the most succinct package.
It unfortunately continues to be that show.
A very tightly wound package known as Kristen Dowdy. So in response to all of this on Instagram, she says, quote, "The police were not called. There was never a police report. The police never had her name, so she was never in harm's way. I understand me speaking up about this is going to create major backlash, but I'm tired of the rumors. Neither of us are racist and have absolutely no hate." And then she says,
"Oh my God," which goes in direct opposition to what Stassi's trying to say as well.
Done. They didn't fire us. They just didn't renew our option. It was their choice to make, and we had to accept it.
We had to.
I didn't get fired. They just didn't renew my contract.
They just like changed the locks on the door and didn't give me the new keys.
Yeah.
And by me not accepting it, I meant I didn't fight with them and break the door down to kill.
They evicted me from the home and then burned it down, but they didn't technically take the home away from me. Oh God! So
yeah, that's some thoughts.
Gets fired from Vanderpump Rules that December. Jax and Brittany announced that they will no longer.
I remember when that happened. It was like Bravo was just like, "Bitch, anyone at this point, go get out of here!"
Like literally
we can't do it anymore.
Them into orbit. Like they literally were flinging them off the ladder as we were saying the space elevator. So Faith responds to their firing on December 17th, 2020. I got this from Page 6, but we don't have to get into it because her comments are very brief. But she expresses that Bravo has done the right thing and she feels vindicated and she feels like the right choice was made in getting Jax Taylor off of the show. And I think really what it was is that like the pressure did not let up that entire year.
No.
If you guys were there in 2020 for the Bravo universe,
talk about the front lines,
it was persistent. It was unending pressure on Bravo about their response to the pandemic.
Across Hollywood.
About the things that the cast members were saying about coronavirus on Orange County, the racism that they were expressing on Orange County, the things that Vanderpump Rules cast members were doing on social media, the way that Beverly Hills cast members responded to conversations about race, everything. It was unending.
Oh, and then New York. New Real Houses in New York getting canceled just after this for racism as well.
Yeah, I wrote a huge story that year around the same time about Southern Charm and having an entire season on Southern Charm about summer 2020. So it was just like, I'm not saying that my thing contributed to this. I'm just saying that like the conversation did not let up for like a solid year.
It was really all everyone could talk about that year.
And so I think that them getting rid of Brittany and Jax so late into the year was them still just trying to sort of like feed the beast and be like, are you satisfied now? Are you satisfied now? Are you satisfied now? And I'm saying that cynically from the perspective of the Bravo people. I'm not saying that from our perspective.
As the corporate executives who are like, okay, is the number going up still? It's still down? Okay, yeah, throw another one in. We just need to get that line up.
So I'm going to jump forward in time now to 2022.
Let's go.
To April 26th, 2022, to a little person's book called Stassi Schroeder. Matt, do you remember what the name of this book was called? I'm just going to ask.
I barely remember it, but it was something like Off With Their Head or whatever.
Off With My Head.
Off With My...
The definitive basic bitch handbook to surviving rock bottom.
I remember seeing this and everyone going like, keep it.
Yeah.
Like that's so nice, but thank you.
Basic bitch handbook to surviving rock bottom. Matthew?
You gotta love it. You gotta love the turnaround.
Can you please go
Not even 2 years and we're like, let's sell this story.
Can you go to the reviews of this to look at them while I get into the story? So
let's go Amazon.
I'm getting
review.
this. I just texted it to you.
Thank you.
So I am getting this from E, but there is a bunch of different stuff in the book. She mentions the faith stuff, obviously, which is the impetus for her writing this book in the first place. Literally, the rock bottom was being a racist. She says that, she made a terrible mistake, yada, yada, yada. Quote, I mean, this is the shit Vanderpump Rules is about. Exposing people, calling them out. I'm not trying to justify what I did whatsoever, but looking back, I was motivated by the fact that Faith had played a dirty role on our show that year by hooking up with Jax behind Brittany's back and blackmailing him with the audio. Again.
Wow.
Can I just say that if I am going to be real, I think that was a racist decision, no doubt, and her decision to do so was motivated by racism. But I believe that like the way that racism colored her perception of that was like, I am going to fight her on the terms of Vanderpump Rules. But because racism was a factor here, she took it to such an extreme level. But I 100% believe that she's like, let's fight fire with fire. Let's fight nuclear warfare with nuclear warfare. Let's go all the way there. Stassi famously led the charge on exposing Kristen in season 2 for sleeping with Jax, her ex-boyfriend. This is like what the show has sustained itself on. And she's admitting that she was willing to sink so low to feed that machine, to keep that machine running.
That's what's so upsetting about it. In the end,
she says, just to be clear, Faith has also said much later that she both didn't want to record the encounter, and that she also has said she didn't send the audio of it to anybody. James actually much later, speaking of fucking misogynists and people with abuse allegations, said that he actually stole the recording off of her phone. Remember?
This is where I'm trying to understand why she's so terrible when it's almost like it doesn't even matter. He cheated.
She was set up.
He cheated and then someone steals it. We're all making bad decisions.
So she says, quote, since my career had imploded, I wanted to be pregnant quietly and privately. I felt torn apart by everyone. So why would I then share the most special thing with those very people? I also knew that people just didn't want to hear from me. It wasn't my time to be out there hashtagging blessed and pregnant. Not that I would do that, but still. It was my time to take a step back and be respectful. But someone in my life decided to take my baby and spin it. I'm 99% sure I know who spawned Babygate. Journalists wouldn't tell me who leaked it, but there was only a few people in my life who I know talked to the press. Whoever it was only a few people in my life. Okay, sorry. Whoever it was truly unforgivable. Unless, of course, they realized the error of their ways and owned up to it and sincerely apologized. I'm waiting. So she says that, I didn't try to have my baby stuff out there. Someone leaked it to the press for me, which, is one of those things. If he said, she said, we have no way of knowing. We have absolutely no way of knowing. But it coming directly after you hire a crisis PR firm sure leaves me wondering. It sure leaves me wondering. And I have a dark theory that what if Bravo leaked it?
I was thinking Kristen, but she said she heard first, but
I'm just saying.
Anyway.
I'm just saying.
We'll never know.
We'll never know. She also says that, now this was the juicy part. Now, Alex Baskin in a lot of stuff has said we wanted to bring Jax back into the fold. He was really adamant about meeting with me and telling me about this life he had in the valley.
Yeah,
and
Jax came to us with
we got this idea about people living in the valley. It just makes sense to me, yada yada. It just was very organic. He sat me down and I put his friends on tape and they just popped and it was we need to do a show in the valley. 2 years prior to this, Stassi writes in her book, quote, that there was supposed to be a spin-off TBD Valley Rules type show since Kristen, Katie, Tom, Jax, Brittany, Tom, and Ariana were all living in the Valley. Quote, if the spin-off show would have happened and if it had been received well by fans, I could have gone on forever filming because I believe that's what makes the show worth doing is that who you're doing it with. And this way, I'd be continuing on with my group of friends, my chosen family. Obviously, though, that's not happening. Wow, a show set in the Valley about people who are all friends being the spin-off of Vanderpump Rules and the second home of those people in the same breath. And that was in conversation with prior
to 2020
to her cancellation early 2020.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. It's just
almost
interesting.
like
It's
been,
just interesting.
Yeah, a long time.
It's just interesting. It's just interesting.
Can I read some of these reviews?
Yeah,
because they're very good. This book is highly rated.
Of course they're good. Of course they're good. You think people are gonna buy this book to hate it?
Listen to this. One of the top reviews here. Wonderful book, must read. Stassi makes a comeback with this funny, emotional, and hard-learned lessons book. I think it's just awful that a person can get quote-unquote canceled from life over a mistake. What happened to second chances? She has gone through a lot, learned from her mistakes, and is moving on. Good for her. I think it's time for others to leave her alone now and let her earn a living again. I miss her in reality TV and wish her the most success in the future. You should all read this book. It's just wonderful how Stassi shows by example that one can change, and I believe she went out of her way to do this. She did all she could to understand and learn. Now listen to this next one. Super relatable and laugh out loud funny book by Stassi of Vanderpump Rules. Stassi is just plain lovable. Yes, she got canceled, but she has redeemed herself and more, and she did it with finesse. This is where I'm like, are these real reviews? Anyway, I have the book and the audiobook, the latter being read by Stassi Schroeder herself. This also, Stassi's always in caps. Don't know why. This was a delight, and I'm just smiling thinking about it. She owns her mistakes and also talks about everything we understand as human beings. Even though I'm a senior citizen and probably not the target audience, I still love this. Love Stassi and her realness. Vanderpump is not as good without her, and don't even start comparing her actions to others on the show, some of whom should have been canceled off the show for cruelty, which I guess is drama. I think that's so interesting how they're like, there are others who should have been canceled, but Stassi didn't deserve it. Bitch, what?
Everyone loves mentioning how they're older than Stassi, but still love the book. I'll admit it. I'm old enough to be Stassi's mom. I have 2 kids who are older than she is. Having said this, I really enjoyed her book. It's honest, funny, irreverent, and I really appreciate the way she puts it all out there. Though I'm not a lot older than she is, I could relate to a lot to her story. No spoilers. Read the book. Well written, interesting, humorous, and relatable. I recommend this book to women of all ages. After all, being a woman can be tough on all of us. Sometimes we have to work hard to be happy.
I'm obsessed with this one title, Rome Wasn't Built in a Day. Stassi is privileged. What she participated in, I love that. What she participated in was wrong, hurtful to many, and potentially dangerous. So, what happens next? Many people believe there's no way forward after participating in something that's such a negative impact. And for some, that may be best, but I don't believe that's the case for those who want to do better. I'm convinced after reading her book that Stassi does want to do better and is acting on it. People that don't want to do better seek out audiences that wouldn't respond positively to a section about cultural competency. They don't write about white privilege, and they certainly don't admit that they acted with it. They don't share that they've learned about systemic racism. They don't want to admit that their discomfort while demonstrating that adults push past discomfort to do what is right. People are entitled to their feelings about what Stassi participated in, but it sure does seem a lot less productive than what Stassi has done with this book. I look forward to seeing her continue on a more positive path that she chooses. Wow. It's just wild. It's just wild.
Wow.
What a sad situation.
I just am thinking about a story in Wired from 2022 inside the underground market for fake Amazon reviews, which I will send you now, Matt, to include in our links. But I just want to read this one part right here. So, are you ready for this?
Please, just let it rip.
Reviews are important. Sales data is hard to come by, but higher ratings generally lead to higher sales, which cover, according to McKinsey, etc. It's not only about high ratings, but also visibility. Most folks won't go beyond a page or 2 of search results. So if your product isn't in there, you can forget about making a sale. A quick search on any of the big search engines or many social media sites just show how easy it is to buy reviews and how much more platforms could do to protect consumers and honest businesses from their deceptive practices. So it talks about this person, Oak, in this piece who went looking for these groups. Quote, the Facebook groups Oak discovered were marketplaces where reviews and ratings were bought and sold. Agents shared listings of products available for reviewers. One of the spreadsheets Oak saw had more than 10,000 products on it. And while most options are relatively cheap, there are pricier ticket items like robot vacuums and even a $5 treadmill. And goes on to detail the research into this topic, but just about how ubiquitous buying fake reviews for things can really be.
If you filter the 1-star reviews, you kind of get what seems to be a bit more like a real review, takes no responsibility for her actions. I bought the book in hopes of Stassi discussing how hitting rock bottom made her realize the error of her deeds. Unfortunately, she spent only 5 pages talking about what she learned about race and her privilege. The rest of the book reads as basic bitch too. Another review, Clueless. I agree that if someone makes a mistake, they should be given the opportunity to learn and grow from it. But this is a very lame, half-assed attempt at demonstrating newfound wisdom and growth. She completely minimizes her actions that got her canceled in the first place, which were not only ignorant, selfish, and racist, but also put another person in danger by potentially subjecting them to law enforcement without any basis. But the part of the book where she professes to get this is so shallow, superficial, and such a very short part of the book that it only really makes the whole thing like a pathetic joke. It's insulting to the person she claims to be apologetic towards and the issues she claims she now understands. The truth-telling and honesty is only a few pages of a very long and very silly book. The rest of the book is the materialistic drivel nonsense she is known for and a lot of self-pity. Granted that could have been entertaining, but not as a book of which is supposed to be about her profound realizations and soul-searching about systemic racism. I also feel bad for the baby. She claims to love motherhood, but the only thing she seems to know about her child is that she's cute, fun to shop for, and a great distraction from her life for not being a low-level celebrity anymore. Also, if she truly wants to make amends, wouldn't there be less self-serving and financially lucrative ways to do this than a book about herself on the cover that's all about her? Jesus Christ.
So, jumping out of the reviews, a little bit later in 2020, on November 12th, 2020, E reveals, quote, the future of Vanderpump Rules. E says that they have, quote, learned that filming for VPR is still on hold and has no date been set for when the cast will resume production. In fact, according to an E! News source, quote, there is no timeline for the show's return. With so many uncertainties during the COVID pandemic, and showrunners are telling the crew that the show has not been canceled, but the upcoming season is currently on hold, and asking them to please sit tight until the future is more clear. And that is where we're going to end you today.
Wow.
On the penultimate episode of Vanderpump Fools.
Wow.
Dun, dun, dun. This episode really is the fall of Rome, isn't it? Like,
it's the darkest point for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna get pretty bad next week, but this is pretty bad.
This is pretty bad.
It's pretty bad.
I don't want to keep you guys any much longer than we have, but please go rate and review our podcast on iTunes. 5 stars really, really helps you guys. It is always so nice seeing your guys' reviews on our show. We love reading them, and they really, really are just one of the many ways that it is worth it to do this every week. Besides all the nice messages we get from you outside of that. I also want to say once again that we have something very exciting coming up, I believe next week. So stay tuned for that. It will be something we're going to demand all of you go engage with. So just, stay tuned with that. We also are going to have some announcements later in the year. So, set aside $10, $20, maybe a little bit more if you need to travel places. But, just think about it. Think about it. Just keep it in mind.
Just save some things aside.
Keep it in your hearts. Exactly. I also want to say just a general thank you to everyone who has stuck by this series and really supported us on this very long venture that we have done. It's been a labor of love, and we're finally almost at the other side of it. And other than that, you can read me on Paper Magazine every week, multiple times a week. Matt has an Instagram that I want you to go follow because he just posted those photos that he's been talking up.
Ooh, yes,
they are so fucking good. You did such a good job.
Thank you.
Shout out to you.
And there's more to come.
King.
More to come.
More to come.
Mm-hmm.
Hashtag TBD.
Hashtag TBD.
Hashtag stay tuned.
Hashtag watch
link
this
in bio.
space. Yeah, especially link in bio.
And beyond that, guys, I've got nothing else to fucking say.
Let's get the fuck out of here.
Let's get the fuck out, bitch. I've got some next level basic to do.
No.
3, 2, 1. Rock and roll.
Rock and fucking roll.
Rock and fucking roll. Raw in hell.
Raw in fucking hell.
I left my heart at the disco. Now I'm crying on the metro.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Eating for Free, a podcast created, co-hosted, written, researched, and produced by myself, Joan Summers, and Matthew Lawson, with original theme music by Sam Huntington of Crooks and Nannies. If you liked what you heard today, you can go to patreon.com/eatingforfree to get access to weekly bonus episodes, as well as access to my other podcast, Beautiful Women Updates, hosted by myself and Alex V. Green. You can also go to eatingforfree.com to get access to the links to our research from today's episode, as well as merch and so much more.